I'll say this, there's a thing in politics you called a Liz Truss moment. She didn't last very long.
A head of lettuce.
I think the famous line was she didn't last longer than a head of lettuce. We are asking for a Liz Truss moment. It may not come this month. It probably won't come this month. It probably won't come this year. But if we go on our current path, I think it's more likely than not that it will happen during this presidential term.
Hey, James, Larry Summers, renowned economist, Treasury Secretary, President of Harvard, where he now teaches. Larry, with you, there are unlimited topics to talk about, but let's start with Harvard. Trump clearly wants to crush Harvard to send a message he can take on the biggest and the best and the richest. He wants to take away all federal grants, trying to ban foreign students, and has called on the IRS to take away the university's tax exemption. This is all about politics, and I think what I hear, Harvard has a very good legal case, but there are reports in the New York Times and elsewhere that time may not be on Harvard's side in a very costly and endless fight. Do you think Harvard can hold out, or will it have to capitulate at some point and strike a deal with Trump?
Look, I don't have inside information as to the university's plans. Here's what I do know. What the Trump administration is proposing to do is completely extra legal, no due process, nothing, completely extortionate. The penalties they're exacting, stopping foreign researchers from being able to cure cancer, have nothing to do with the alleged crimes about humanities professors shouting anti-Semitic things, and that this is casting a huge and damaging shadow over all of higher education, as foreign students, for example, are scared to come to the United States. This is the biggest gift we ever gave British and Australian and Canadian universities in terms of competition. This is the biggest gift we ever gave China in terms of goodwill. So I don't think Harvard has any choice, given that it's got a $50 billion endowment, given its reputation, given the kind of network it has. I think Harvard has no choice but to resist. And so I'm very proud of what Harvard has done. I urge them to do it. Well, having been said, Al, I think you are right that one hopes that with the leadership of the judiciary, that a way will be found to resolve this conflict, because there are huge concerns about the way great universities run. There aren't enough people with conservative views around. There's been much too much identity politics. There has been a emphasis on particular concepts of social justice. I heard a story yesterday, I don't know if it's true, but it could have been true, that we have these genius stem cell researchers at Harvard, and they were running what was a fantastic stem cell program. They'd gotten it started when the federal government wasn't funding stem cell research. They were finding cures for all kinds of diseases. And they got a visit from a dean's office telling them they couldn't keep talking about two genders, men and women. They had to use some other set of language to refer to the spectrum of people. I heard a story about this one I verified extensively. We have a great initiative with a brilliant guy who's going to win a Nobel Prize someday in quantum science. And on their website, it goes about the initiative, and it talked about quantum science and computing, and quantum science and materials, quantum science and employment opportunities. And then it had an equal size section on quantum science and Black Lives Matter. And that's just not the way we should be doing things. So there's a lot that the university ought to do to reform. There's a lot that's reasonable for the government to be pushing the university to do to reform. So I hope that some judge is going to step into this, tell the Trump administration that they're out of line, but also recognize some places where Harvard has reforms it needs to make and broker a solution. Because this war is, I mean, Harvard will be okay in the longest of runs, but we're going to make slower progress against diseases. We're going to have a less competitive economy. Kids whose dream was to find opportunity by coming to the United States to study at universities are going to be completely alienated from the United States. And China is going to be picking up the pieces.
Well, Larry, one of the stated, I don't believe this administration, frankly, gives a damn about anti-Semitism. I think it's an absolute phony excuse. But anti-Semitism at one point was rampant at Harvard. They had a study on it. You have talked about it at great length. I guess my question is on that and some of the subjects you just raised. How much in the aftermath of October 7th, how much progress or how much changes or what steps has Harvard taken to address these missteps?
Here's the painful and unfortunate truth, Al. If you took the agenda that I thought was necessary after October 7th, Harvard did 10% of that agenda between October of 2023 and February of 2025. Since then, in response to what's been happening, or at least observing what's been happening, Harvard has done half of that agenda. They've replaced politically biased actors who were running big centers. They've put discipline not in charge of professors who love to do juror nullification, but in the president's office. They have scaled back some of the DEI stuff where, like the story I told you about the Stem Cell Institute, where it was just going a bit crazy. They have clarified that there are certain kinds of protests you can do and certain kinds of protests you can't do in terms of intimidating people. So they've really done a fair amount, but they did it slowly and a bit reluctantly. And I'm not proud to say that. And it's a difficult aspect of the story. But look, you are right. Donald Trump is a guy who's had multiple meals publicly with Holocaust deniers. He's a guy who told his vice president to make friends and speak up for the neo-Nazi party in Germany just a month ago. He's a guy who called the neo-Nazis in Charlottesville a fine group of people. This is about a pretext for attacking a kind of elite institution that he finds it attractive to culturally oppose. And it's really important, and I think that I want to say one other thing. It's really important to keep some sense of perspective here. Look, I think that Harvard and other elite universities have gone too far with some of this DEI stuff. there's been a kind of reverse discrimination that hasn't been attractive. But it is not 1/10 the sin that George Wallace standing on the door of the University of Alabama, blocking people from coming in and studying in a high school or a university was about. This is not Orville Faubus in Arkansas. This is not the University of Mississippi in 1964. So, yes, there is pushback. There should be pushback on some of the excesses. But when I see the kind of railing against this, like it's some kind of egregious racism, that is a failure to understand and recognize what racism was in this country, and in a few places still is. And I think that's badly, badly wrong. And my great fear is that because this is all pretextual, it's really an excuse for attacking somebody they want to attack, that they're actually going to set back the cause. Because for people like me, and there are many of us who think that we need to reform, we need to redress the balance, it's much harder to make the argument when the people on the other side can say, you're just echoing the crazy Trump administration.
Yeah.
And
no.
so it's making it, this is emboldening every hyper progressive in the academic world. And that's just an unfortunate byproduct of what they're doing.
That's fascinating, Larry. Let me ask one more question and turn it over to James on the ban of international students. I suspect the courts will throw that out, that he can't do that for all sorts of reasons. But he can make it difficult. He can drag out the process of visas and other things. You know, in a parallel of sorts, the Supreme Court almost 7 weeks ago ordered the return of a migrant illicitly deported into El Salvador, and the administration has done nothing. Larry, I don't believe these people believe in the rule of law. So even if you win that case in the courts, I think it's going to cause Harvard problems for a while.
No doubt. No doubt. And look, I think that any sensible person abroad is not just going to think this is only Harvard.
Right.
They're going to think it's Harvard this week, and it could be whatever other university we're talking about next week. And that means we're going to lose, coming to the United States, the immigrants who start half our great companies. That means we're going to lose the immigrants who are behind a substantial part of our scientific progress. And that means we are going to lose incredible goodwill. I want you to indulge me in telling a story. We won the Cold War. We won the Cold War because of Mikhail Gorbachev. Mikhail Gorbachev's two big ideas that won us the Cold War were perestroika and glasnost. He did not make up those two ideas. He got those ideas from a really prominent political advisor he had. You might call him the Russian Carville, a man named Alexander Yakovlev. Alexander Yakovlev spent his life as a communist, but then he dismantled the Soviet Union and the Soviet Empire. And people asked him afterwards, where did you get that idea? Why did you do that? How did you know that this was wrong? And his answer was, I saw the United States when I studied at an American university and studied what Franklin Roosevelt did to save the system in 1933. And that's when I realized how profoundly Russia had to change. And I did everything I could to make that happen. If we had been closed to Americans, to foreign students, that would not have happened. And what a profound thing. If we were 1%, if that was 1% of winning the Cold War, it justified everything that we did. Take another example. Xi Jinping's daughter studied at Harvard in 2011. Didn't use the name, did it anonymously, but it's come out since. Spent 4 years as a Harvard undergraduate, living in our houses, interacting with our students, taking our courses. Surely that kind of influence has to have been a thing the United States wants. And why are we throwing that all away? Aren't we proud of our country? Don't we want people to see and experience our country? Aren't our universities part of what is best in our country? By the way, if you look at trade competitiveness, exports and imports, just like it's an export when a tourist goes to Disneyland, it's an export when a student comes and studies at our universities. This is one of our largest industries. This is one of our most competitive industries. This is one of our industries that pays people very, very well. Why aren't we working to improve our trade surplus in higher education? There are a lot more people in America who want to work in higher education than God knows want to work assembling iPhones. So why aren't we doing that? I mean, why are we rewarding Vladimir Putin and punishing the Ivy League? What possible logic could that be as a way of advancing our national interests? I just can't understand it.
Oh, James Carville?
So I just want to make a point. Broadly, somebody told me this morning, I read a Paul Krugman piece, and he was in Lubbock. 80% of the graduate economics students at Texas Tech are foreign students. Could you imagine the percent of engineering graduate students at Georgia Tech that are foreign students? They couldn't live without them. Okay?
Absolutely.
They could not live. Purdue could not exist without foreign students coming and studying engineering.
Absolutely. And so why don't we want to have all of this tremendous talent? I mean, these are the people who are talking about the importance of excellence, the importance of competitiveness. Why don't we want this? Look, put it in another more, maybe even most elemental way. Without immigrants to American universities, it would have taken 4 more years to win World War II, because there wouldn't have been any radar. There wouldn't have been the Manhattan Project and the atomic bomb. And I mean, take the names: John von Neumann, Leo Szilard, Enrico Fermi. These are all immigrants. And without them, we would not have had the technologies that won the World War II in the way that we did. And we haven't seen our last struggle. And why do we want to deny ourselves all of this?
I think an immigrant taught physics at Princeton at one time.
Albert Einstein.
Yeah, you might have heard. So, Larry, I have to ask you this. During the Clinton administration, you remember we were obsessed with debt, interest rates. We wanted to send signals. I remember that shit like yesterday when I said that to the Wall Street Journal. God damn, I want to be the bond market. That's all everybody talks about around here. How we're seeing these, eye-popping numbers that they're coming up with in terms of the amount of debts that we have, and not only that, how much they're going to increase this. And there's a thought that, well, Larry Summers and Bob Rubin are green eye shade guys, and you hear these people say, as long as you borrow in your own currency, you can't get hurt by your own debt or something like that. Should we be worried about this coming explosion and what could be the effects of it? Or are we just being nervous Nellies here?
James, the world's greatest debtor will not forever be the world's greatest power. I promise you that. James, if we want to worry about being dependent, I'm a lot more worried about being dependent on China to hold our debt than I am being dependent on China to buy beryllium or lithium or some rare earth. This is setting up massive dependence on our part, and I'm not going to go into all the numbers unless you push me to.
Just give us some facts.
But I'll just say this: the debt relative to our income right now is 3 times as high as it was when Bill Clinton became the president in 1993. And the projected deficit is far higher than it was when Bill Clinton became the president in 1993. It's the problem, I would say, is 2 or 3 times as big as it was when the Simpson Bowles thing got launched in 2010. We are not paying attention to the first law of holes. Stop digging. And we are not right now near a sustainable path. And the big, beautiful bill is actually a prescription for the prescription for deadly dangerous decline bill is what it ought to be called, and we're going to adjust, and the question is whether we're going to adjust with a plan or whether we're going to adjust chaotically under pressure. I'll say this, there's a thing in politics you call the Liz Truss moment. She didn't last very long.
No.
I think the famous line was she didn't last longer than a head of lettuce.
Right. Front page.
We are asking for a Liz Truss moment. It may not come this month. It probably won't come this month. It probably won't come this year. But if we go on our current path, I think it's more likely than not that it will happen during this presidential term. And they're doing, look, there's some things that are hard. Raising taxes, that's like complicated. It's like difficult. People hate it. Social Security, fixing entitlements, people depend on it. Those are complicated and difficult issues. Here's some things that I don't think are very complicated. If the IRS hires one more auditor to audit affluent people, that auditor brings in $5,000 an hour when they work in extra revenues. And that's before you think about all the deterrent effects.
And Trump is getting rid of them.
And these guys want to cut the IRS budget in half. I think their plan's going to cost the country $1 trillion over the 10-year budget window. Here's an idea. We've got treaties that serious people in office negotiated that says our bank will help you by asking our banks to give you data on your tax cheats, and you give us data on our tax cheats so we can enforce. The Trump Treasury trying as hard as it can to abrogate and move away from those kinds of agreements. So there's low-hanging fruit to collect revenue and fix these problems. Look, we need to be going the other way. This is something Joe Biden got right. Joe Biden thought it was outrageous that there were 100 people who earned $10 million or more in the mid part of the 2010s who didn't file a tax return and didn't get noticed within the statute of limitations. And that's part of why they enhanced the IRS. Not only is the Trump administration backing off all those enhancements, it's cutting the budget to way less than it was before. And what are they looking for revenue? Is it really a good idea to raise revenue with a sales tax on toys that parents buy their kids at Christmas? Is it really a good idea to push the cost of a smartphone up by 50% or 100%? You and I are still going to have 3, Al, but it sure matters for a lot of people in this country when you do that. Is it a good idea to push the price of a new car up by $4,000? These are ways of financing the government that are about as bad as you can imagine. And that's before you get to the fact that other countries will retaliate. I mean, this is a play where you injure yourself in practice, carrying out the play with no defense. Right. And then when you try to do it in the real world and countries retaliate, it gets much worse.
So, to use this for an education moment, a teaching moment, I can see these polls and they said, what party's better on the economy? The Republicans are always ahead of us. Very rarely are we ahead of them. And I'll see you on the lecture circuit and people say, well, I believe in empirical evidence. I believe in, is there any reason that a person based on historical performance, okay, of a macroeconomic statistic would not vote Democratic every time? Is there a single macroeconomic indicator under Republican Democratic presidential candidates since World War II, since 1960, since the Cold War? I don't care how you figure it. Or they even tell us about the difference of economic performance between the two parties.
I first studied this in 1988. I wrote an op-ed with Roger Altman in the rather futile effort to elect Michael Dukakis that compared...
There were other problems, Larry.
Compared Democratic and Republican administrations between World War II and 1988, and we said that the Democrats were always better. And people said, well, it's a short sample. You don't have that many of them. It's only been 40 years. Well, now it's been another 40 years. And the 40 years since we wrote that op-ed, the advantage of Democrats over Republicans has even been bigger than it was when we wrote that op-ed. And look, I want to be really clear about something. Yes, it's true that the unemployment rate is lower, the poverty rate is lower, the number of Americans working is higher when we have Democrats. But here's what's in some ways even more surprising. Corporate profits are better. The stock market is stronger. And so the capitalists did fantastically when Bill Clinton was president. The capitalists did fantastically when Barack Obama was president. The capitalists did fantastically when Joe Biden was president. The capitalists didn't do as well, but they did better when Jimmy Carter was president than they did when Richard Nixon was president. And they did better when John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson were president than they had when Dwight Eisenhower was president. And they sure did better when FDR was president than they did when Herbert Hoover was president. So it is just there as a fact. But look, our party has to understand some things. We cannot be the party of completely open borders. We can't always look for the next rights issue. Sometimes we need to celebrate the phenomenal things that have happened with the leadership of progressives and not turn equality into equity, and not always be looking for the next frontier issue. And look, we need to be for growth and jobs. We were wrong to be against pipelines. We were just wrong. We were wrong to be against natural gas exports. We were wrong not to be for all sources of energy that made our economy stronger as we evolved to a cleaner, greener economy. And I'll tell you something else that's really important to me, James.
Go ahead.
Probably with your help, Bill Clinton always used to say, I want there to be more millionaires in America. Because if there are more millionaires in America, there'll be more people starting successful businesses, employing large numbers of people, and making America a stronger, better country. And that needs to be the democratic attitude, that we want a rising tide that lifts all boats. And yes, we have a special concern with the smaller boats, but our strategy for helping the smaller boats can never be destroying any part of the economy. We need to get back to that attitude, and we need to stand for strength. And if we're able to do those things, I think we'll have an easier time bringing people to our side.
Oh, thank you, sir. Now, I've just heard it. I've been like this, but you didn't hear from old Louisiana hack Carville. You heard from a tenured professor at Harvard when he was 26. If you want to make money, vote Democratic.
There you go.
Get paid, vote Democratic. I can't thank you enough, Mr. Secretary. It's just a big honor. I would remind both you and Al that my last two graduate assistants at LSU, one was from Russia and one was from Greece. And they were pretty goddamn good.